Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform, an incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now. Thanks for coming out to the Seeds of Tao podcast. It's Emily Prieto today, and I've got my awesome guest, Alessandra Caine, with me today.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
And she's currently in the beautiful city of Venice, so she's got some really great energy to bring today. So what got you up this morning, Alessandra? What got you up and excited to do the work you're doing?
Well, I would say when I come back to Venice, it's always a very confrontational thing in the sense that I wake up in a beautiful city and I'm reminded every day of the challenges that we're facing. So Venice is, as everyone knows, probably the sinking city in the world. So there are many actually out there. But, you know, growing up here, I was always reminded of the fragility of cities and also how much they can be impacted by nature. And probably that's something that got me into environmental studies in the first place. But it feels so special to be here. So that's what I woke up this morning thinking. Yeah.
What an interesting balance of like enjoying the beauty, but also like, but the issues are right in front of me, right?
Yeah, and then there are just so many, not only the natural one, but if you see the over tourism and how much is, like the consumption side. I would say among all the cities, regenerative is definitely not an adjective that I would put close to Venice, talking about regenerative businesses. And it's because it's mainly extractive and there's really little that goes back in recreating society and culture for Venetians in Venice. So it is indeed a good example of probably how things shouldn't continue in the future. But nevertheless, it's it's a bittersweet feeling, I would say.
So I'd love to dive into your story. We've talked a little bit and you have such an interesting story. So how did you get started doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think maybe as cliche as it sounds, I think my family has always had a big impact. And as Italian, I can get I would say my mother. So she had a great impact on my I would say initial work choices, mainly because she also was working at the water committee in Venice. So she was actually a translator for the commission who decided on the dikes that are trying to save Venice from high tides. So I would say that also hearing her story and her work always inspired me to actually take action on, I would say, management of nature and natural resources. So that's why I decided also to study environmental sciences. I early found out that I was not the sciencey type. So laboratory were not my thing. I really wanted to be outside and in nature. And that's why I decided to look more at the natural resource management. And I went to Amsterdam to do this type of combined master, because I think in Italy, I struggled finding educational programs which were so advanced in combining, let's say, the environmental side with the economic side. So yeah, that's a bit how I started.
So where did your journey go after you got done with your studies there?
Yeah, so first I studied in Trieste, my bachelor, then Amsterdam, I did my specialization, and I was lucky enough to encounter a professor, and this professor was also busy with the dike in Venice. So of course, Venetian looked at the expertise in water management. That's the Dutchies. And this professor actually was the one who started the master I did. And I went to him saying, I would love to do something in ecosystem management. I just love the idea of having a very holistic and large scale approach to ecosystems. And he pointed me to Willem Verweda, who's the co-founder of Common Land Foundation. And this is a foundation based in the Netherlands, but focused on restoring landscape globally. And I think was love at first sight, in the sense that as soon as I understood what they were doing and the type of approach they were using, I couldn't see any other way on how to do things. So it really stuck with me, and I was lucky enough to join the foundation for 7 years. So that's that helped a lot to have the right introductions.
So while you were there, were you like working on kind of regenerative land ecosystem design, kind of like boots on the ground in Europe?
Yeah. So indeed, I think Common Land was the first time I kind of got exposed to the regenerative concept. So what is regenerative and why it is important? And they applied it in the terms of specifically of regenerative agriculture and regenerative businesses. So Common Land, what it does, just to give a bit of context, so it's a foundation that looks at degraded landscapes, and a degraded landscape can have 1,000 and 1,000 of hectares, and it tries to understand how this landscape can be restored by dividing them in kind of ecological zoning. So they look at the natural zone, the combined zone, and economic zones. And in these zones, they try to develop businesses which lead to 4 returns, they say. So really the return of inspiration. So how to help people to be connected with those landscapes spiritually or just emotionally, but also the social capital. So how to actually provide, good jobs or employment or entrepreneurship. And together then the natural capital and the financial capital. So how to restore actually with reforesting, but also taking into account that financial return are very important for people to thrive in ecosystems, and that businesses should actually lead both to an income, but also by default, they should restore and not be degrading. So that for me was the moment in which I realized, wow, that makes so much sense. It's just when I still remember my boss saying, the problem is that nowadays we want to maximize returns per hectare, whereas what we should be doing is actually optimize different type of returns per hectare. So move away from a maximization philosophy of only one return to an optimization of several returns, which by default also gives away this idea that we need to have so much, but kind of having degrowth or optimization on a long term. So that for me was the moment in which I realized, regenerative just makes sense if we approach it in this way.
Mm-hmm. So that was kind of one of your first looks at kind of the business side of it. Right. Yeah. Other than just the land, because they're doing the land, but it's also talking about entrepreneurship and about business in a new perspective. Yeah. And I mean, I know now that, B Corps are kind of a trendy name, and, it's a big movement now. But people were thinking about it before now, right? And seeing the extractive systems.
which
Definitely.
obviously probably contributed to the movement now, because it doesn't happen overnight for sure. So where did your journey go after working with the Common Land Foundation?
Yeah. So after that, well, I've just learned so much working there. It was great 7 years, and it really felt a bit like the first boyfriend. When you have the first job, everything looks great, the colleagues are amazing, but you feel like you want to explore the world, so it was a difficult choice, but nevertheless the right one to decide to stop. So after that, I just consulted for projects. One project with the World Resource Institute in Rwanda, where we were supporting small, medium enterprises on applying circular practices in the food system. So we were developing a fund which would invest in technical assistance for these SMEs. And that was also a crazy and amazing experience to see on the ground, really, what are the challenges that entrepreneurs are facing in trying to applying these practices, which now, are really popular and they're thrown around by ministries and big businesses. But then the one who have to implement them, then they're the one who struggle the most. Because I would wonder if you ask anyone what regenerative business mean, I wonder what the answer would be back. It's great that it's on everyone's mouth, but sometimes it's also diluting the impact because it can be so vague and so misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once it becomes a buzzword.
Yeah, indeed. So there's pros and cons always, of course. And I have to say that also in those years after Common Land, I kind of was fascinated by the idea of becoming more entrepreneurial myself. So having seen how important it is actually to embed this type of regenerative thinking in businesses, I thought, well, I find it so important. Why don't I try myself? So I understand how to do it or what are the challenges. So with some friends, we did try to start an e-commerce called Plant-Based Fashion. And the idea behind it was, can we use e-commerces as a way to actually move financial capital between the people who are really producing the goods, so people who are doing, for instance, the raw materials for fibers, and the consumers. So we wanted to use the e-commerce as a way to kind of accumulate financial capital and then redistributing it to the different actors in the value chain. And that was indeed a very, very good idea. And that's probably what many entrepreneurs figured out, that you can have a great idea and that the more you think about it and the more you try to implement it, you are just confronted with the reality of how challenging it is to set up a business. What legal structure do you need to implement? And what type of stakeholder agreements you need to have and contracts. And I found it a very fascinating process also to dive into the business model. Where are we going to get our margins? And the whole idea of the platform was to reinvest part of the money. So for every, for instance, shoe that was being bought, a percentage would be invested in regenerative textile production. But even there, we realized very soon that it's such a low margin that you can get with e-commerces, that then even being financially sustainable as a company and then investing, that would have been like the golden star. But nevertheless, it was a fascinating process to just learn what it means to start a business and realize what are the challenges that entrepreneurs face when they have to pitch their business and come up with the story and the team. And it was a great experience.
So how long were you in that kind of early entrepreneur troubleshooting stage? Yeah,
I would say 3 years, and we're still on it. I would say we haven't really given up. I think what also I've learned being more entrepreneurial is that you need to be very flexible and adaptable. So if you see that an idea doesn't work, you need to very fast, let's say, adapt and maybe try to change your business model or your value proposition. So we're still trying to figure it out, what could add value. I think we were soon very confronted with the questions of additionality. Are we adding value as a business? Or are we just another e-commerce platform which is incentivizing consuming more and buying more things? So very soon we thought, maybe we need to maybe we need to change and just see what the market needs and what the different entrepreneurs we want to connect with needs, and design our business accordingly. So it was a kind of also confronting to just have to let go your initial idea and kind of let go your pride as entrepreneur and just figuring out, hey, maybe I need to do something different, and it's okay.
Yeah. It's definitely a balance there, right? Yeah. How do we stay true to our vision while still being flexible? Because as we learn, we have to accept feedback, we have to pivot and adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a big lesson that we've learned. And just see, are we really adding any value? So I think that was for me the biggest takeaway and the hardest question. And I think it's also the question that probably investors will ask you anyway, like, where is your additionality? And as an entrepreneur, you also need to realize that investors themselves have these questions of how additional is the money that they are investing. Are they investing in something that many are doing, or are they investing in something that is really niche and nobody, is investing in already, so that their investment becomes really impactful? So I think that's something that maybe sometimes entrepreneurs don't realize when they talk with impact investors, that you need to show why their money will be additional to any other traditional investment.
Yeah. And you have some serious experience working with those investors. Tell us about kind of the transition into that space.
Right. You're right. I think indeed after Common Land, I realized that I thought, it's so important, the narrative that there is around the financial sector. And I haven't studied I don't have a financial background. So I study environmental sciences, and then I try to combine it with economics. But through Common Land, I realized how important it is to actually change the narrative that investors have. So how can we use a different timeline, when we look at investment? So if we want to restore, regenerate, we talk about generations. So also investors need to be more patient. They have to have more patient capital. And that's something that investors get really agitated. So I think indeed I got so intrigued that's why I think I found Tonic. Tonic is a global impact investing network of private investors, asset owners, or family offices and private foundations. And I think I met them still when I was at Common Land through a very good colleague and friend of mine, Koen Van Sai. And he also has a very nice podcast, by the way, which is called Investing in Regenerative Agriculture. And through him, I actually got introduced to this world of investors that really think differently. And I got really fascinated by, wow, there are actually people who are understanding the challenges of impact entrepreneurs, and they're willing to, get into this journey of transformation with them. So I'm, grateful and blessed enough to be part now of this organization, which works with so many investors around the world.
Let's take a moment for a promotional break to tell you about a course Seeds of Tao has just released in its beta form. The entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast want to see change. We want to be the change, and we want to bring that change. We want to change the culture from an extractive and degenerative one into a permanent regenerative one, a culture that cares for its people, planet, and future. This is the reason why so many entrepreneurs we talk to at Seeds of Tao start regenerative enterprises. They don't do it for the money. They do it because they want to see change. The challenge is that it's hard to build a business, especially a regenerative one, that is the catalyst for change. I often interview and speak with individuals that have managed to build a business and livelihood from their passion. And they often tell me that they wish they could do more, or they feel like their efforts aren't enough. They want to scale their efforts and the efforts of others, but they don't know how. Don't we all feel this way sometimes? We see our neighbors, industry, peers, suppliers, producers falling further into degenerative practices, and we think, I've made the change. Why can't they? How can I get them to change? We know it's hard to change, and for some, it's harder than others. We also know that we can't change others, only ourselves. We can, however, pave the way for change and make it easier for the next person to be that change. That path always starts with a story. Seeds of Tao has launched its first online course for regenerative entrepreneurs, and its objective is to help you pave the way to regenerative change through the power of your brand story. You'll learn to naturally grow and scale your business using brand storytelling and other inherent marketing systems that have stood the test of time. As you do this, you'll learn to do it in a way that influences change, not forcing change. No, we should never do that. It never works. Nor should we manipulate, even though it's an unethical way to make things work. Let's be a positive influence through the story and the message that we put out. The course is called the StorySeed, and it's the first of 6 initial courses we're releasing to help regenerative entrepreneurs build the regenerative economies of the future. The first 500 students to enroll in StorySeed will gain lifetime access to this course and the other 5 courses in our initial catalog. To give you an idea of what some of those courses will be, in addition to StorySeed, which covers marketing and messaging, we're building a funding and finance course and a course that helps you navigate the cultural forces and flows that you face as you create systematic and cultural change in your industry. On top of lifetime access to the Pando Academy course catalog, you'll be able to join us for weekly office hours, utilize step-by-step action workbooks, get discounted prices on other offerings, and other amazing benefits. This is a beta offering, which means you're helping us pioneer an education platform and accelerator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're an innovator and early adopter building a regenerative enterprise, come pioneer this with us by following the promotional link in the description or show notes and enrolling in StorySeed. Okay, let's get back to the episode.
So I know that you've seen a broad scale of challenges that entrepreneurs are facing, working with entrepreneurs earlier on and consulting with them, not necessarily looking for funding or directly dealing with investors, and then now working with entrepreneurs really trying to get investment to get their stuff going. So I'm curious to hear, are you seeing some of the same challenges? Are there challenges different? Like what patterns and things are you seeing?
Yeah, this is a very good question indeed. So when I was at Commonland, I was on the side of people indeed developing these regenerative businesses. And the biggest challenge was for sure how to explain their story and really how to bring their impact or theory of change, if we want to use kind of a jargon. But how are they going to create value and create that in a way that has metrics that can be measured? And investors, I think, of course, they can be very understandable, or they want to understand. But if you don't give them some metrics, they also struggle in kind of make it tangible for themselves on how to get value. And they are willing to look at different type of values. So maybe non-tangible, social, inspirational, but they still need some numbers. So I think the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs was to kind of measure or make some estimates of what is the impact that they could achieve, and to bring that in a coherent stories that then is appealing and inspirational for the investors. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges. And then indeed it's a language. It's a language issue, I feel sometimes. It's investors and organization on the ground, they talk different languages. And I think kind of bridging that it seems obvious, but it's not that easy. So I think indeed you have quite some experience in that, maybe also trying to create a narrative, different narratives.
Yeah, well, I think that's just a really common challenge, like you're saying, whether entrepreneurs are looking for investment or not, because it's all about speaking the same language as your target audience, whether that's clients, whether that's investors.
Right.
And I mean, we talk, marketing lingo, client segmentation, right? Audience segmentation. You may have a segment that's really your clients. You may have a segment that's really investors. You may have a third segment because you're also dealing with government or whatever. And all of those segments, like you said, you have to talk to differently.
Right.
We're working in an accelerator right now and talking with investors that aren't necessarily super savvy about regeneration or know that lingo, right? And so we can't speak the language of regeneration to them because they don't understand what it is, right? So I think a lot of entrepreneurs say, oh, well, my biggest issue is funding, but that isn't really the issue. The issue is their message. You can't, like you said, like coherently explain it and the value for them, which echoes when we talk to a client, we're selling them on the transformation, what's in it for them. Right. Same with the investor. The transformation may look different because they're genuinely looking for a value exchange so that they can keep doing what they're doing. But we have to sell that story, but also that transformation, like you said, whether it's client, whether it's investor, but messages like that really important crux point.
Yeah. And I mean, I still remember I was still a student when I joined my boss at Comoland at a meeting, and I remember him saying, the secret of fundraising is almost never mentioning money. It's never the money. It's never the ask of money. It's really going there with a strong story and a strong idea and team, and the rest will follow. And it sounded really like, yeah, right. But it actually was the case. So it's that's for sure a challenge. And the second one, I think it's trying to be prepared in explaining also why you need time, why it takes long. And especially when we talk about regeneration and regenerative businesses, it might take more time to design something that really has to be detached from a current economic system. And, so in that sense, preparing your investors and the people you work with in thinking in a longer perspective, it takes, it takes a lot of time also, but it's very important because you need to align on expectations. Otherwise, that's become a big obstacle.
But you're working with people who are changing their perspective. Like we can't. It's gone are the days when no investors are looking at these types of businesses because they really are now. You just have to hook up with the right ones.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think what I see a lot is, it's interesting because indeed you asked me what do I see from a different perspective from people on the ground and now with the investors. And I see that investors have similar challenges in, they want to be patient, they understand, but also they are fighting an old system. So they themselves find themselves depleted of their energies because they have to constantly convince other financial institutions or other financial actors of what they're doing. So it becomes also a double pressure on them to actually show that what they're doing is working, and it does take more time. So it was very inspirational to actually hear from an investor in a very open conversation that they felt depleted, and it was just challenging for them to have this fight and almost defend this type of businesses, even if the businesses were not doing great or were very slow in providing financial returns, because they believe so much in it, but they still have to convince also others. So it's kind of a chain of struggles, but maybe businesses don't see sometimes that also investors or impact investors are on their side but struggling. So it's a matter of having empathy from everyone in the value chain, let's say, and just try to support each other.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think there's a lot of stigma or a lot of judgment from entrepreneurs. Sounds bitter about it if they can't get the funding or whatever. Right. And then they automatically go to, well, all they care about is money. How many times have we heard that? All the investor cares about is money.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, indeed. Now I see a different side of investors. And for me, what I see the most potential in is actually the collaboration between investors and enterprises. I see that more and more impact investors are willing to sit at the table with potential enterprises and kind of give them some tips on how to better their business. So they have a much more active role if put in the right position to use that. Also to support businesses in different ways than just money.
Which creates a whole different relationship, because it's not just money skin in the game, but they really want to see you succeed if they're investing in you. Right. But it's more of an intimate relationship between with the cause and the people.
Yeah, definitely.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think I know that entrepreneurs so many times, like you said, the investors are depleted, the entrepreneurs are depleted too.
It's a tough game. Yeah.
There's so many forces we feel like are working against us.
Right.
And as entrepreneurs, I know that people are always talking about moving away from this economy, from decentralized economies, but at this point, we also have to work within the economy and the current systems, just like the investors do, like you were saying, while also hopefully helping everyone to move to a better system.
Right. So indeed, it's a journey for everyone. And I think it's a personal transformation that is as important for the businesses as for the investors. And I'm hopeful that many more investors will find this out, and they will see that how important this is. So maybe it's because I'm also building this bubble, but I do believe that it's coming. More people are waking up.
That's so good. Yes. That's such a message of hope, which we always need in regeneration.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
You said about Venice, like you're watching it sink, like we're watching things burn and flood and everything. But we can't just focus on that. We have to focus on those pieces of hope.
Right. Yeah. And I have that also as a personal story. We have some land with my family outside Venice, and my younger brother, he's actually a farmer. So he's managing part of the land. And if I look back sometimes, I actually, if I could go back, I wish I didn't brainwash him so much on regenerative agriculture, because he's really, let's say, trying to implement it, and he made it really his way of life, which I'm very proud of. At the same time, knowing that it's in Italy, knowing the place where he is, I just see him struggling. So this positivity tends to leave me at times when I see actually how hard it is for young people who do have this willingness and this determination to change things, to actually have to face challenges every single day. And the story that I see in my brother, it's actually the story that I've seen in many farmers around the world when I was looking at when I was working at Commonland. And it's a story of struggle, on feeling lonely, of not having anyone around you that believes in what you're doing. You have your neighbors who look weird at you, saying, what is this guy doing with all this different plants association, such a hippie? And it's, I can be feeling, you feel very isolated. So the government, of course, doesn't help when you're trying to do different things. Political systems or, legislations also don't make it easier. So, in those moments, I really feel for all the people on the ground who are trying to change things, because as much as positive, even if we can be very positive, it's still a struggle, an everyday struggle with your own livelihood and everyday income. So, it's definitely different levels, the macro and the micro on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. We have, it's like, and you don't want to completely turn, ignorantly turn away from that and only focus on the positive things, because that's not being respectful and conscious about what's actually happening, right? It's kind of juggling both. How can we really see and like have a reverence for the bad things that are happening, but not letting them totally overpower us, take us down, because then we can't be a light. We can't continue forward and try to create positive change.
Yeah, for sure. And I think why I think the podcast that you're doing here, but also the people who are working on connecting entrepreneurs. It's a very important work, because you're finally trying to break the barriers who make feel these entrepreneurs very lonely. So in that sense, I think it's important to for these people to realize that they're not alone in struggling against these things, and everyone is facing different challenges, and it's becoming, of course, a global issue. So it should become also a global community which answer to that. So it's very important to connect across borders, and in Europe, maybe also beyond.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and the regenerative movement has really been this edge culture, right? Mm-hmm. And we're all working so hard to push it into the mainstream so that everyone can, speak the same language as us. but the world is big. And sometimes it feels like we're really the only one in the corner working on what we're working. But there is a lot of people out there working on building connections, figuring out how people can collaborate. And we all know, I know I say all the time, it's like no man is an island. There's not going to be one business that pushes all of regeneration into the mainstream. And now the world's changed. It's not going to be one person. It's going to be everyone finding each other, collaborating, amplifying each other's voices, getting the message out. It's from many mouths, not just from one.
Yeah, indeed. And if there's also another lesson that I've learned when I was working at Commonland is just if you look at landscape as this, unit of measure around you, there is a big chance that you're going to find people who think like you. And I think there is it's very powerful if you can find those people, yes, far away, if you're in a community, international community, but also the one that are in your landscape, because that can become such a strong also cultural connection that really makes your impact even bigger, because it's you're going to probably face the same issues at the ecological level, on landscape, on the governance level, on the political level. So I think you really need to bring as much leverage as possible with people close to you, because then you can have a stronger voice to maybe lift those barriers that you are facing in your day-to-day city or community.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you were talking earlier about regenerative business and how it's kind of becoming this buzzword, and what does it really mean? So I'd love to hear what regenerative business means to you.
Yeah, good question. The way I've looked at it is that I think when I talk about regenerative businesses, it's something that very goes close to circular. So regenerative means that if you are producing something by default, you're kind of extracting something from somewhere. And the important thing is actually to give it back. In agriculture, of course, the clear example is this distinction between biological, organic, and regenerative. I mean, biological is trying to produce without having inputs that make it polluting or that have bad impact on health of people and plants. But regenerative is really like building back the soil which allowed you to produce that thing in the first place. So there should be, in general terms, always a balance of actually bringing back the first raw materials that allowed you to produce in the first place. So for me, indeed, regenerative, it always has this component of circularity and trying to balance natural equilibriums as much as possible. And of course, in some sectors, it's easier than others. But then that's why we need to start thinking also at bigger scales and not only look at the small scale, but in bigger scale. If we look at value chains, how are we going to make that regenerative so that we close loops and we actually give back? And you will see soon enough that soils always come back, because eventually most of things are produced out of our soils. So that's how I define it for myself.
Awesome. And so I'd love to hear, because it people talk about being an entrepreneur, and they'll talk about the struggles with the business, right? Or all the hats that you have to wear as an entrepreneur. So, but I would love to hear how it was personally for you when you started when you really became like the entrepreneur personally for Alessandra. Like how was that for you?
How was it for me? I would say it was really empowering on one side, because it really felt like, I was acting on something that it was important for me. So really the passion that we keep hearing about, I was finally putting some actions behind it and not only thinking, I care about the environment. Well, I care and I'm doing something about it. So that for me was an important aspect. At the same time, I don't know. I feel like I was very confronted with the fact that as a person, maybe it doesn't come natural to me to be so entrepreneurial. So I think sometimes we're confronted as individuals, like we want to be entrepreneurial, but being entrepreneurial requires different set of skills. And it's okay if you don't have them all, but then it's more important even to find team members that can fill those gaps. And I think that for me was a big lessons of, hey, I want to be a leader of a company, a CEO, but do I really have the skills to be a CEO? Or am I more indeed the supporter and the people person who makes sure that everyone is connected? And yeah, so I think for me, when I started the entrepreneurial journey, was also a transformation, a personal journey of understanding who I am, what are my strengths, and can I put those strengths in service of my business? Or are those ambitions actually being an obstacle to my own business because I want to be an entrepreneur, but I'm not in the best position to be one. So I think that was really important for me to realize, are my skills matching what is needed for the business? And that can be very, very confronting for your ego, I feel. And we are all a bit egocentric, I feel. So it's in a good and in a bad way, but it's really a matter of understanding, how can you serve best your own business in that sense? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was one of the skills that kind of came up that you felt like a lack of, or one of the skills like, oh man, I totally needed to be good at this and I'm not?
Yeah, I would say, when you're setting up a startup or something, you need to be a go-getter. Like you need to just act immediately, almost, I don't want to say without thinking, but you just need to act fast and change fast. And I think sometimes I think too much or I have a bit more doubts. And then, you get stuck into that, maybe I should do this or maybe not. And I think in the first phases, you don't have time for that. You just need to go and try and change. So, I have a very good friend of mine, the founder of Violent. It's actually a Dutch company, tea company. He has always been a great inspiration for me. So I invite everyone on this podcast to go and check him out. But I've always admired how fast he was in actually trying things and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing without associating any judgment, a personal judgment to himself if he would fail. So that is something that I definitely did not have. So in that sense, I wish I was a little bit more like my friend.
That is so important. Yes. And I know I struggle with it. I think every entrepreneur struggles with that. Mm-hmm. Like if we see something not performing or not being received as like, we can see that it's amazing. Why can't everyone else see that it's amazing? Yeah. And if things fall flat, separating it from ourselves, that doesn't affect my value. That doesn't affect my worth.
Yes.
And as entrepreneurs, we just put our hearts and our souls out on the table.
The little babies.
I know. Yeah. And so it can be so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So hard. Yeah. So that was a big, big lesson. It just has nothing to do with you. It's, the passion and the energy that you put into it is already itself amazing achievement and already a good sign of your values and who you are. So that should suffice, or how do you say, should be sufficient for you to feel good about yourself. And, the rest, if it works or not, it has really no impact on who you are. So yeah, I think the good is in the trying. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's like a really profound thoughts. And I'm going back in my mind all the times and I was good with that and when I wasn't good with that. And I feel like it's such an emotional roller coaster.
Totally.
As an entrepreneur. And we have to be so careful that we're taking care of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
We're like the backbone, right? If we fall apart, it all falls apart.
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, a more empathy with our own selves and and just keep trying and have fun with it. I think also it's, of course, if your life and, financial life depends on it, it's less easy to take it so lightly because it becomes really a matter of survival. But, it's also, it should be something that in this period that everything is so heavy and difficult, we should find fun in it because otherwise it also becomes such a burden. I realized at a certain point, because it wasn't succeeding that well, this platform that we were creating, it felt really like a burden that almost I didn't want to work on it, or some days I was really shying away from it. And then I realized, well, that's something wrong. Like, where's the fun? When we started this, we were so enthusiastic and so happy and so determined, and the mood has shifted and has impacted our own business. So in that sense, how much fun and how much, lightness you can have is also a good indicator that you're on the right way. Taking into account that not every task is fun. I mean, there are, still the bureaucratic operational things that nobody loves or very few love, and that's fine. It's part of the process.
Yes. Appreciating it all, but making sure to celebrate where you can.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Otherwise, life is too short. We need to have as well. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'd like to bring up a topic that it comes up a lot when I'm talking with entrepreneurs in terms of investment. Because I feel like there's really certain things you have to, like, not all entrepreneurs should seek for investment capital, right? So I'd love for you to kind of talk on that a little bit. What does it mean to really get investment capital, and how to decide whether it's appropriate or not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I think, I think what I've learned by working in, let's say, the impact investing sector is that there are so many different type of capital that can be used, and the timing of your business is also very important. You can start with asking for some grants. You can evolve by getting some venture philanthropy, and then you can move to actually different type of investment rounds. So I think, and that's again goes back to the challenge of the languages and the jargon. So sometimes we don't even know that investors have this differentiation with their own investment. And for me, it was really strange when from working at the NGO, like Common Land, I went to this world, and I actually never really heard about venture philanthropy. And I was like, what is that? And really comes from the fact that there are out there some philanthropies who are willing to kind of cover for the very risky investment that other investment wouldn't cover for. So if some companies are really, let's say, risky, but with a high potential social return, there are these people who are willing to invest as if it was a grant, as if they were kind of ready to risk it all and lose it. Yet they want to treat it as an investment, because if that succeeds, then you can also have, high returns or chances of returns. But knowing that there are different type of capital out there, I think it's something that entrepreneurs should put more time into and understand really what is their stage, what are their needs, and is the capital that they're asking matching those needs in that specific moment in time in their development.
Yeah, because so many entrepreneurs and businesses start bootstrapping.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it really, and I mean, a lot of times when you're getting investment capital, there's, an equity exchange, you have another seat at the table, and maybe you're not okay with that, but
absolutely,
looking at grants or other things, there's different things out there. So maybe as entrepreneurs, we shouldn't, have tunnel vision with it, because it can be this array of potential funding options if bootstrapping isn't working. Because a lot of times bootstrapping, depending on your business, can be fine until you get enough momentum to really accelerate. And in other cases, investment capital is really pivotal to the growth of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think indeed, exactly as you say, investors should put at least, or entrepreneurs should take and put some time in understanding what is the type of investors they need. And that's it's scary, because also for me, when I was setting up our startup, I had no clue of these things. But the thing is, I also didn't know who to ask for this type of information. So in that sense, I think refining your questions is the best way to really get an answer, because otherwise, if you have general question, you will get general answer. And then if you ask, I need money, where I'm getting money, and people will say, go to investors. It's as general as that. Whereas you would say, I need money actually to do research and development for my product. Where can I get grants that cover for only this research and development thing? So really be as specific as possible on the type of activity you need grants or money for, and find out what is the best match. So I think it's difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. I struggle with that as well. But really get acquainted with the type of capitals that are out there. It's already a first good step.
Mm-hmm. So do you know of any resources or places people can go to kind of start that search other than just plugging things into Google?
Right. Well, I think for sure at Tonic, so the organization where I work, we do have, a platform called impactterms.org. And this is more of a legal, let's say, terminology that is used in impact investing or impact enterprises. But for sure, also the Global Impact Investing Network. So all these organizations that are trying to get standards out for investment. Most of the time, they also have different type of capital differentiation. There is also another one, EVPA, if I'm not butchering the meaning, I think is European Venture Philanthropy Association. But indeed, there's just so many financial institutions that are trying to streamline and create standards for investors and enterprises.
Cool. And I'm going to put those links in the show notes so that people can dive into that and have that as a resource.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So if you had to give advice to the younger, I don't mean by like necessarily physical age, but like business age, younger entrepreneurs and enterprises that are trying to do things regeneratively, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, good question. Well, I think for me, it was really important to have the right people around me. I was fortunate enough to, work in a sector where everyone kind of understood what regenerative meant. But I would say if I didn't have that, I would definitely look for these people. You need someone that can understand you around you when you're designing your business, because that's gonna strengthen you and how you explain it to others. So indeed, I would say try to surround yourself of people that you admire or that have those skills that you think you don't have. Like for me, for instance, talking with this friend of mine who was really entrepreneurial and successful was the best thing, because I could see what was needed or what I lacked, and inspired me to do what I did. So really, surround yourself with people that are maybe different from you, that would not be your first best friends, but yet they are the people you aspire to become, or the entrepreneur you're aspiring to become, because by just shadowing them, you can learn a lot and get a bit of strength.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like we've hit on so many really important points.
Yes, same. Yeah, I hope it wasn't all over the place, but I'm Italian. I tend to just jump on different things.
I think it was great. I'm all over the place and I'm not Italian. So
great. So I hope our listeners will just enjoy this.
Yes, wonderful. So where can people get in touch with you, find out more about your journey, follow your journey?
Yeah, well, they can find me on tonic.com. So that's where I'm currently working. My email is alessandra.caine@tonic.com. I think I can also share it with you so people have it. And they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm usually very open to just have coffee and chat about these philosophical things. And I just love people, and even more those who are trying to do good. So always happy for a good chat.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on the podcast with us today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review if you can on the podcast platform that you're listening to. And we look forward to getting to know you and your business more. Keep growing those enterprises. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us to further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Regenerative Business Economies Network, known as RegenBen, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. Regen Ben also has an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own regenerative entrepreneur startup story, or any other suggestion you may have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcast and community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.